Hello and welcome to today's Distributed Republic webcast. Very excited to have you all with us here today. For those of you who haven't joined us before, the Distributed Republic webcast explores the impact of decentralization, Web3 and the Metaverse on our social, economic and political systems. Our mission is to ensure that communities that can benefit the most from the inception of new technologies have access to the resources, education and expertise to thrive in a digital world. We're going to do our best to talk about this topic in a way that minimizes jargon, keeps answers short, makes sure that we're making it as understandable as possible. But if we are saying something you're like, that sounds like gobbledygook, I've never come across that word in my life, we do have AI terminology guides and Web3 terminology guides that were produced by our friends at Cybergear. You can go to distributedrepublic.xyz, documents and infographics, and you'll see the terminology guides there. So if something hits your ear and you're like, I've never heard of that before, that's where to go and check out. Please, if you would like to add your comments and questions in the comment section, we can see them come through and we'll do our best to answer any questions that anyone might have as we talk through. So that's our housekeeping done. Today, I am very happy to introduce Lauren to be able to go through our topic, which is Phygital Unleashed, crafting unforgettable and immersive experiences. Lauren, before we get started, would you like to do a bit of an introduction to yourself?
Sure. Happy to be back. And Jamie, I don't know, it's phygital jargon. I don't know. Should we call that out right now?
I think it is, but our first question, I feel, covers this.
Disclaimer has been spoken.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, well, I'm happy to be here. I know we always have like great talks. I'm Lauren. I also go by Carlo. And I've been a fashion designer and working in the fashion industry for about 15 years, which is, I don't know, it flies by, but at the same time, it doesn't. But yeah, I've been within kind of this digital Web3 movement for the past 5 years. And it's been really interesting to see kind of like the different waves. And right now, we're really on the AI wave. But I think it's made me realize like I'm someone that's really interested in movements and like kind of innovative trends, but always within this framework of like creative and fashion. So yeah, I'm American, but I've worked in London, New York, and based in Paris. And I've been a designer at like top luxury brands like LVMH and Kering. And also founded one of the first fully Web3 digitally enhanced fashion labels called ALTERRAGE. And yeah, and so now I basically work as a consultant, creative producer to help the fashion industry connect to these tech solutions, but not just, I think, tech. Like, I think what we have this big commonality around is around like social good, sustainability, inclusion. It's like bringing innovation along with values. And I'm still trying to figure out like what's the best way to say that in this really holistic, all-encompassing way. So I'll let you know when I figure it out.
There's a lot of money in being able to figure out how to be able to word those sentences together. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so a bit of introduction to myself. I'm Jamie Bykov-Brett. One of the organizations that I've set up is called Metahub, and we help develop metaverse spaces, help with being able to create immersive experiences. So obviously very relevant to our conversation today. And before we get started on our first question, going to highlight your AR earrings that you're wearing, which is a very good example of phygital at the moment. So you have your digital overlay on your physical self. So I think, yeah, it'd just be worth saying a little bit more about the AR products that you're wearing at the moment.
Yeah, for someone who like is so into change, this is like the one thing I've kept consistent is wearing these earrings. Just because I think a lot of times we talk about things, but we don't actually put it into practice. And when we actually use it, we learn a lot more. So that's why I'm still wearing these earrings. We created them through the label ALTERRAGE. I want to say now it's been about 3 years. And they were the first like AR earrings, augmented earrings to be minted as NFTs. We did it in collaboration with a platform called Jevels and my team at the label. And yeah, they really like took us places, like featured in New York Times. And I wear them on every call, and it starts kind of like new kinds of conversations. And there's even like I'll give you like the full, like rundown. There's even like a face smoother, like within the filter. So it's like I don't even need to put on makeup. Like I am wearing some right now, but like I can
you
just
didn't need to because you've got the AR stuff on.
exactly. so yeah, so it's just like, yeah, a really applicable daily way to interface with AR.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you with when it comes to putting filters and stuff like that. So my one's very subtle, but it's an eye contact one. So in this call at the moment, everyone's like, "You keep really good eye contact on calls." And like, it's all AI. That eye contact. If I sometimes look away, you can sometimes see my eyes glitch out for a little bit, and that's because it's got an AI filter on it to be able to keep that eye contact going, which is great for doing calls like this and to make sure that we're creating that personal connection. So let's go on to our first question, which is how would you define Phygital and what makes the integration of physical and digital experiences so impactful?
Phygital, here we go. We're committing to the word. But yeah, I remember I did like my first presentation on Phygital. I had this podcast called The Future of Phygital. So all about exploring like this word and like this kind of emergence of a hybrid experience. And yeah, so Phygital, it started in 2007, like when I looked this up online, coined by an agency called Momentum. And so they spoke about it like really in the sense of retail, of like how do you enhance shopping with like digital experiences, like to layer on top of the physical. But yeah, now this word is just like become just how do you merge like these two spaces. And so I think we'll just like, I think we're already at a point where like this is pretty normal. Like we're pretty used to our like scanning things with our phones. I think if you see me in my earrings on the call, like that still might be a bit shocking. Like it's we're not like totally to that level, I think, of acceptance. But we'll talk more about this, like I'm sure in the other questions. But I was like went on Instagram yesterday and I was just looking at, it's been a while since I've looked at, like culture and media. I've been like building something quietly. And I noticed like Katy Perry's Instagram, she's wearing digital fashion. And so it's like, all right, so it's been a couple years now. Like now it's becoming more normalized that like there is this digital enhancement if it's on our photos or if it's like a filter we're interacting with. But yeah, those are just some examples, but it's really an open term to just describe like what is the blur of like digital and physical.
Yeah, love that. And I think going back to kind of that consumer experience as it was, like when I always think to Phygital, I describe the experience of ordering pizza, particularly, not a modern experience or going like, oh, this is completely crazy and out there. But the whole idea is that you wanted a physical product, you've gone onto a digital space probably to order it. So you've ordered it through a website and it's turned up physically at your door. So you've had that interchange where it's seamless between physical and digital worlds until you get something that appears that you want in your physical space. And it's that whole interchange between the fact that our walls between our physical and our digital world are almost becoming so far eroded that they're almost indistinguishable from each other. You were wearing the earrings at the moment. The AR earrings is a great example of going, well, there's no really distinguishing between necessarily your digital and physical. It's just all happening in the same space. And I think that that's one of the most interesting aspects of Phygital experiences is those digital overlays on top of everything that we do. So yeah, I find the term itself, is that physical, digital, and the intersection in between them. And I think one of the things that makes them so impactful is that obviously there's a limitation on what we can do within reality. Maybe that's because of resources, maybe because of that's the things like gravity. You can defy the laws of physics within your within your digital spaces. And it's that kind of enhancement that means that we're creating experiences that we would be limited by if it was just a physical experience. And we can do things more creatively, more imaginatively, maybe even more resource efficiently, when we're trying to do things in a phygital way. So that's my impact assessment on it.
Yes, and good pizza example.
Good pizza example. I've got a little 3D printed version of me. Okay, It's a 3D printed version of my avatar, and I always use it as a great example. Phygital is it's a digital version of it's a digital representation of my physical self that's been physically printed. So it's a physical version of my digital interpretation of my physical self, and that's Phygital all
Yeah,
over.
is that like a double negative?
Yeah, it's kind of just tweaking its way through the world. So
Yeah.
next question: what key technologies are driving the development of digital experiences, and how have these technology evolved over the last few years?
Yeah, so shall I introduce the terminology?
Definitely.
So yeah, so oh, one second. Coffee. And you could see more the fakeness of the earrings. But but yeah, a couple years ago I started to coin this term called meta-reality. And it's just about, rather than, I think, this two sides of like kind of like this expression of identity or experience, there's three. And so we have like the physical, we have the augmented, and then we have what I call larger than life, which is totally virtual. I think like terms have kind of shifted since then to describe it in different ways, but I kind of see it in three. I'm also like a big fan of threes. So I break it out like that to simplify the explanation of like different uses of technologies and how to determine like what is best for what purpose. So like ultimately 3D is like kind of like the underlying technology that we're creating these things in, and then we're adapting them like through different programs, through like technical processes of like putting them into those different spaces. So if we take like the example of like a garment, or like if we're still on like the earring topic, so these earrings we first create as a 3D digital file, and then we adapt them to, we use like lens list, which is like a filter through Snapchat. And so that file goes through kind of like a certain process where you change the mesh and then like kind of rig it. And so then it will still follow your face. So that's something augmented, I would call like on real life. So that's kind of like one space. Another one is, so now let's say like your example of the 3D printing. So 3D printing has just like gotten progressively better. I remember like 10 years ago, we still had 3D printing, but the materials were super limited. Like the machines were very big. And now like we're 3D printing shoes. They look great. Like it's 3D printing has come a really long way, which is really good news for fashion to make transition to like an on-demand model to reduce waste. And so then I can now like 3D print these earrings in metal, and then like you'll see me in person wearing them, and you'll be able to kind of make that continuity.
Yeah, continuous, yeah, along those lines. Yeah, really.
Yeah. Through like the digital and then the physical, and then also Jevels, they did some experiments like putting the earrings on avatars. And like a couple different like systems like Unreal and like different avatar kind of builders. And so, yeah, it provides this way to either like have one thing that like becomes like very clearly you and like this identifiable symbol that then can transcend like these three spaces. Or like, which is kind of more aligned with my design ethos, is like you adapt your products based on the space. So for example, like the digital would be like really enhanced. Like for me, that's like haute couture, like it's larger than life. And then the physical is a lot more restrained. It's like made sustainably. It's more simple. So I guess I see, our physical becoming, like maybe more simplified, and then our digital enhancements more kind of larger than life.
I love the meta-reality formula, and I use it. I talk to people all the time about it, and I think it's a great way of contextualizing it. Obviously, I tell them it's by you. You know, if anyone asks.
Oh, thank you.
I don't claim it as my
credit.
own. Yeah. But what I really like about it is I think it's that conceptualizing of almost like the phygital spectrum. Everywhere starting off from your immersive world. So obviously with what I do at Metahub, that's more of your immersive spaces where they can be through a monitor, but that could also be in a VR headset. And that VR headset means that you are fully engrossed within that world. Whereas you've got your AR being like, yep, okay, this is your digital overlay over your physical self. And then also things like that physical bit of being able to go NFT chips, whatever it might be. But it's that kind of hologrammy things where it's existing within your physical spaces. And I think the reason that that's so meaningful, and it ties on to what you're saying about that continuous journey in and out of your physical and digital spaces, is, and it comes back to what we were talking about last episode, which is digital identity. People want their spaces to reflect them, and they want to be able to be, as you would have clothes in your physical space to be able to represent you. Well, actually, when you want to go into a digital space, you also want clothes that are going to be representative of you. But you can also take that to another level. You can experience things in digital space. If you want to go to a space with your hair on fire, fantastic. We can do that within a digital space. You can do things that you probably shouldn't do in a physical space, but to give that kind of really cool different effect. And that whole idea of digital identity and being represented in different ways in both our physical and digital worlds is an area that I think is a massive win for the consumer experience, particularly within fashion. As you're an expert within the space, there is so much opportunity here to expand borders. I saw this through Manchester United the other day, where you can put on in Roblox, you can put your Manchester United kit on your avatar now. And that lends itself to being able to go, or you've got a tribalism, a representation now in that digital space. And before you might have just been buying physical shirts, but now you can buy a digital one as well, which I think is really, really interesting.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, really, I guess, right, what fashion is all about is like culture. It's about, tribalism, who you're connecting with. And so, it'd be interesting to know like who is like the main market in the games. And then like, I guess big opportunities for brands to kind of reach new markets, new age groups, where they already are, meeting someone where they are, I guess, versus like trying to get them to go somewhere else.
When I remember having a conversation with someone about their daughter was talking to them about what they wanted to have for Christmas presents, okay? And she's like, Dad, I need new shoes, I need new coat. And the dad's like, wait a second. We got all this recently. Like, you definitely don't need new shoes. You don't need to go. She's like, no, Dad, you don't understand. It's from a Roblox character. Okay. And this is a 6-year-old, 7-year-old girl. And the amount of money that's being spent within those things to digitally reskin, to buy those digital clothing is a completely new experience. And I think that there's a change in behaviors and understanding as well. Whereas an older generation might be looking for more tangible, physical products. Actually, a younger generation is quite happy with these digital items, but obviously they're easier to build. They can be more sustainable. They can still be reflective, and people's purchasing habits have changed to be able to really kind of look at that digital perspective rather than just having to have a physical product there. And people are willing to spend money on it, which is something that might not have been true in the past. I've got a really big question, and I think ties in nicely to what we've been speaking about so far, particularly engaging the creative process that you go through. So what does that creative process look like when developing Phygital experiences?
Yeah, so I kind of got into it a little bit as far as like maybe the more technical side of like you're always starting with like a 3D model when you're wanting to adapt something to like a digital space or make a digital kind of enhanced experience. And so with the label, how we work is basically combining like the traditional fashion design process with like these innovative tech elements. And so that's where we had spent a lot of time kind of exploring what is that process and like what does kind of the label of the future look like to develop products across these like 3 spaces. So what has like really changed in the past couple years has been using AI. And so I think to create something that's like really authentic and like a higher level, you definitely have to go deeper than just like prompting. Like there's always like a fundamental need of like research. And this is something I definitely learned while working in luxury. Within like a fashion house, there's always like the DNA and like the story that like are basically like visual signifiers that like a brand has. And so that's like one component to always keep in mind. And I think that's because, like, I don't know if we're still early, but like, I think when someone doesn't have that experience and then like creates products, they can feel like they kind of lack something, and like it may be hard to pin like what that thing is. And so that's why like it's definitely like a meeting of two sides, like a meeting of tradition, but then like enhanced with like technology. And so I'm never one to say like an all or nothing, like no tradition, only technology. So it's really about, you have the best result when you mix both. So research is really fundamental, storytelling with a product, and then like knowing who that product is for. So that's like a bit of marketing as well. So after doing this research, like what's really changed is like the process of visualization. And so I used to spend hours and hours in Photoshop, like collaging and basically like making this like very realistic, almost image-like replica of like what I wanted the design to look like. And now like you can use Midjourney, you can use like these different AI tools to do that in like 5 seconds. There's still, I think, like some way to go, and like you have to kind of like work with different tools to get something that's like really intentional looking, that matches what's in your head. So that's where I'm also like trying to learn of like, okay, this is what I want it to look like, but then how do I work with AI to actually get there versus like random generations of like things that aren't what I'm looking for. So kind of that's where we're at, as like far as the innovation is like probably the most focused on right now, is how do we work with AI to like get where we want to get with design. And so then, right, that's like kind of like the enhanced design process, and then it goes into development. And we launched, they're called like launch files. And so that's when you're developing like a prototype, like in physical, but normally I make like a launch file, like regardless of what kind of product it is. If it's like an augmented reality product, I just put all that information of like the visual like description. So then I give that to like a 3D artist. And so then they create that in a 3D program like Clo or Marvelous Designer or Blender. You really choose the program based on where you want that product to kind of end up. So for example, if it's something that will be physical, it definitely needs to be like to scale, have proper measurements. So then you would use something like Clo or like Optitex even. But if it's going to be in a totally in virtual environment, it's going to be like on an avatar. It needs to be then like a lower weight is how I describe it, like a lower like heaviness of file. And so that's done like partially in Marvelous Designer and then also Blender. So we're combining gaming techniques with fashion design processes to ideally like result with a product that like looks really good, but then has like those technical capabilities. So yeah, long answer, but
no, I love it. And I think I kind of wanted to go back to a little bit of what you were saying at the beginning there about almost the creative process isn't just how do I technically do this, but actually understanding the experience. And one of the ways that really applies to me is by trade, by where I started off, I was a youth worker, but also like a learning development professional. And everything that I was doing was around designing a learner journey and learner experience. And that forms a lot of the creative skills that I have within designing phygital experiences, because it's that vertical of understanding how do you take someone from point A to point B. It's not just about creating a product, but the experience of that. And the whole reason I got into work within phygital spaces and set up Metahub is it was during the pandemic. I set up my business the week before the global pandemic. Don't set up a business the week before a global pandemic. Not a good idea.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that is the time to start a business. What?
Yeah, it's there's very little resources online about how do you set up your business during a global pandemic, particularly in training and facilitation, which nobody was interested in. So I was sitting there going, okay, what does the future for training and facilitation look like? What's going to be the changes that we're going to see, and how do I separate myself from all of these other training and facilitators who also do not have any work at the moment? So it's not just me, it's what's going on in the world. And one of the things that I was looking at was going, right, well, that phygital experience, I can imagine education if we're looking at LMS, if we're looking at Zoom, if we're looking at all this digital learning that's going on now, well, what's 2 steps ahead of that? And that's when I started to research into VR technology and the digital experience. And I was thinking, well, how does that experience enhance the learning journey? And we can do so much within our VR headsets and our virtual spaces. We can control the environment that people are learning in. We can customize the experience based on the individual. We can design the space so it lines up with the learning content. And that creative process was really looking at how does digital enhance learning and how do we lead people through that journey? And that's why a lot of what we've done at Metahub is, although we've done it for large organizations, for team days and things like that, is we've done a lot with universities as well. And we set up the Metropolitan University, which is an entirely metaverse-based university, to just teach people through the basic concepts of Web3, Metaverse, AI. And that creative process really came from just looking at what was being requested, what is the experience that people want to be able to have, and how can we start to give them some examples of what that's going to look like. I think the hardest thing within Phygital experiences at the moment is people have a very limited scope or perspective of it, or very limited experiences of what that actually looks like. And now they're kind of going, okay, I want to get a metaverse. Okay, what do you want a metaverse for? I'm not sure. I just been told I need to research metaverse. So we need to kind of give people some more of those examples. But I think the best place for you to be able to start is go, what are we doing at the moment that would be enhanced by digital? And that's definitely how our creative journey began.
Nice. And I think I'd add, like, I had this thought the other day. Like, I think what we were doing wrong is making digital the story, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like digital isn't the story. Like, what we care about is the story. And then, like, how we enhance it with digital is just kind of like something that I don't know if it needs to be said, you know? And so I think that's where like a lot of the barriers have been, is like going so future so fast. And so then it kind of scares people. And so, I think always pairing change with something familiar, or like something, yeah, that like someone already likes and understands. Like I think about like in the space you were talking about, I think you had like some kind of Matrix reference. Like you had these little mini games like within the space, and I was like, oh, I know the Matrix, so like I get it. And like it was a lot more engaging that way versus if you just made a space that was just like, okay, just run around and like I have no context, or like I have no way that it relates to my current life. Yeah, that's just been kind of a thing in my mind.
Definitely, that's why we went for a digital campus, because we have tried that. We tried, one of the mistakes that we've probably made along the way is we designed spaces that were very creative, because of course you can. In a metaverse space, we can defy the laws of physics. We can literally create, if you can imagine it, you can create it into a space, and people would go into those spaces and go, I don't get it. Like, but the fun bit is that you don't need to get it. It's just a really immersive experience. And actually what people want is, first of all, we have to have that kind of reflection of something they understand to be able to engage with it. And I think that's a really meaningful part of that journey so far. I do think as people become more socialized with it, there will become a opportunity to maybe go a bit more into the extremes. But for the here and now, people are taking their first steps into phygital worlds, and they kind of need to be able to contextualize it a little bit better. I think the other thing that you said there that was really interesting around digital being the story, and it shouldn't necessarily be. And one of the things that I'm passionate about is going, well, that's why we have to think about the consequences of these technologies, particularly politically, socially, economically, because too often we do spend time and go, AI, 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 VR, 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 metaverse, 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 and actually going, but what's the value? What's the value in a world that's underpinned by AI? Well, that could, change the way that we contribute to society. It could change the economic, political, and social value of a human being. That's the interesting part of the story, not what AI is doing or the scandals around founders or whatever it is. It's what's going to be the impact of it. And yeah, we spend too much time focusing on digital rather than focusing on the impact. It's going to take some time. Sorry, otherwise we'll spend a lot of time on that one. It's a great one to go through, but I think it'll be good to get another one on, particularly leveraging your expertise, which is how is the role of digital assets transforming the fashion industry? And what are some examples of successful integrations in fashion with digital elements?
Yeah, there's been a lot. Oh, and I see in the chat we have Garima. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. And Dirk. Hey guys, thanks for your comments. Give you a little shout out. But yeah, so how is digital changing fashion right now? I still kind of break it up into those like three categories of like the physical, the augmented, and the digital. I have like probably the most experience still with like the physical enhanced. So like I mentioned, we have this AI wave right now. And so it's like designers are like very afraid, to be honest. Like I guess every kind of creative professional is like, all right, so I'm going to be replaced by either a bot or somebody who knows how to control the bot. And so but I think what's been like proven is like if you don't understand like what makes a good fashion product, then there's still something lacking. So so right now, as far as like AI and how that's like being integrated into fashion within studios, there's like a couple of different things. They're like using it to streamline processes within like production to be more efficient. Within design, like kind of the more interesting thing is like training these models on like previous collections to then help kind of like act as a design assistant. So I'd say that's probably like the most interesting application for the design process with AI. And then like 3D isn't new to fashion, I think, but like what is new is like having 3D be the product that is sold. So and like a digital asset that has value. So that really obviously took off with like tokenization mechanisms with NFTs. And like basically now you can make this digital thing rare and like so therefore it like gets value for a certain price. So 3D like has always been used within like pattern making, within development to just streamline. And then like where this is really growing is like the visualization process within development. So after I've like sent my launch file to like the factory, I would normally receive a physical sample. And so now it's becoming a lot more common practice to have like that be completely virtual. So I can see on my screen like a 360 3D model of like the 2D design that I began with. And that will just like be more and more streamlined, like with AI and 3D working together. And then what was new, like which has been like the whole NFT thing, and the thing that, yeah, I think we're getting there, like to think obviously like with your example of Roblox that like digital assets have value and then putting it on chain. And so there's still right a lot of conversation of like when should something be stored on blockchain, when shouldn't it? But like I'll give an example of a shout out to Stella Achenbach, who's the founder of the Elena project. So they spent like a lot of time like thinking about how blockchain is like integral and important to have things on for this like interconnectedness ability in like the same way that we have in like the physical space. So if you want, if we want like a future system that's like totally automated and also like cross-border, cross company, like using blockchain, I think is just important, obviously, for transparency as well. So yeah, I would, and that kind of links to like if anyone's heard of connected products. So that's like the other biggest thing as far as like sustainability and legislation being launched, is this idea of like a new kind of care label on your garment that you'll be scanning, and then that will link to show you like the origin of the product, or even like experiences, or even more like assets, kind of like membership, like even like your garment can now become access to some event. So it's quite interesting.
I think there's that whole idea of almost having a digital product passport, right? Where you'll be able to, through blockchain technology, be able to, scan something in your shoe, whatever it might be, but to be able to go, we can say, this is all of the materials, this is the journey that this product has been on, this is, who was involved or what part of the process. And you can have that complete transparency that allows somebody to walk away with a digital product with a full understanding of how it came to be and who was involved at what parts of that process. And that interconnectedness from a product perspective and that connected product perspective, I think will change people's decision making, purchasing power. You'll be able to moderate that ethics from your own perspective with a lot more understanding, but almost instantaneously as well. It won't have to be a behind the scenes news article where they've done digging. You'll be able to see that in a very transparent and authentic way. I also think from that successful integrations, we can see there's a term that we talk quite a lot about when it comes to Phygital is interoperable. So this whole idea that you can have a product that you've bought for maybe one digital world or one digital space, and you can port it into another, or you can bring it into a website. And once again, that's what blockchain really enables us to be able to do, is to create these things that are assets that have value in those digital spaces that we can take from one space, bring into another space. And I think that changes our fashion bit. We wouldn't expect to buy an item of clothing that we can only wear in one space, but from a digital point of view, quite often that's what you do. And that will change to being able to go, if you buy a digital top, then you can have your avatar wear it in your spatial space. You can have it wear it on your Ready Player Me avatar. You can have it wear it in Roblox. You can have it on your Fortnite, whatever it might be. And I think that's probably the bit of the game changers. Reskins and customizing characters, that's been going on for a long time. But being able to have your consistency across spaces, that will be really game changing for people's purchasing decisions.
Yeah, right. And like real ownership that, you can import into different places, like you said.
So next question. What are some notable real-world applications of Phygital experiences that have significantly enhanced the consumer engagement in various industries?
I don't know. Do you want to start?
I mean, I feel like I've mentioned a few of them around, your Manchester United kits and stuff like that. I think some other notable examples, trying to think off the top of my head now, but that have really kind of changed that consumer experience. I think Fortnite has to be one of those ones that really stands out. Anytime there is a new film released, anytime there is a new, I suppose, popular institution or moment or anything like that, they have these digital assets being brought into the game. And what's really interesting about that is it used to be, when you look at IP, organizations would try and keep it entirely in their own bubbles. They want to maintain their IP. They don't want it to be seen in other ways or other spaces. Whereas now they can't get it fast enough out the door. They want to be able to have it so you can utilize it in all your virtual spaces and virtual worlds. I think the other thing, one of the Phygital experiences that I've really enjoyed is particularly around Star Wars. They do some incredible stuff. So if we were to break this down into the kind of almost like our meta-reality bit, if you look at Star Wars from a theme park perspective, there's a lot of that augmented experiences. They're adding all of these digital overlays, but also your physical presence being able to be there. You can also then bring that into your virtual spaces. And I think the first VR experience that I ever had was a Star Wars one, where they had it in a physical space. You'd put your VR headset on and you were walking around, and me and my brother went there, and bless the little consoles. My brother's partially blind. He can only see out of one eye. And we're going around and I'm like, Linford, I can't tell who's shooting at us. Like, you've taken that side. And he's being shot at by a stormtrooper, but none of us can see where it was. I don't know that he's there. And Linford's like, he's in my blind side. I didn't see him. So we took around. But what they were doing as part of that Phygital experience, so we have our digital overlay, we have our physical space, and then what they were also bringing in, which I really loved, was really simple, but just things like heaters when you're going over lava. So what would happen is you would feel yourself in that space. You've got your headset on, you've got your digital experience, and then you feel the heat coming up from the ground below you. And you're like, oh, this is strange. This is a bit perplexing. Like, your body doesn't know how to react to it. Another one that I really think that's kind of along those same lines, and a project that I'm getting more involved with, is around VR training. Currently doing some work with people where we're talking about it as a practical learning tool to do things like fire extinguisher training. So what you can do, you put on your VR headset, your controller is a fire extinguisher, and you can go up and basically learn how to use a fire extinguisher without on a fire, with obviously not having to start real fires all of the time. And that's such a great way of being able to go, well, this is now portable, it's scalable, we can give people training. And the last thing that you want to do is the first time that you use a fire extinguisher to be in a situation where there's a fire. But by being able to create an immersive experience, people are able to get their confidence up, be able to learn how these tools work with a controller that feels like a real fire extinguisher. Once again, you can put a fan heater there to be able to create that coming closer to the fire experience. It can also be done for things like cherry pickers. So it might be your first time working at heights. The last thing you want to do is your first thing at heights to be able to be an experience where you're like, I don't know if I'm comfortable working at this height. But we can create it in a VR headset, create the experience, and people can learn a little bit more about themselves and how they interact and participate in the world. So there's just a few of them from my perspective. I don't know if you've got any other you want to add.
Yeah, I like yours. And then like companies can save a bunch of money in hiring costs, like by finding the right person earlier on. So maybe sometimes that's how we have to phrase it. It's like, what's the true incentive? And like, because, right, like I've seen VR for so long, like not so long, but like, I think in the first internship I did when I was living in London, which is like, 15 years ago, they were doing a VR headset project. And so it was like decorating it and then creating this digital experience. And I guess I'm wondering like, okay, like why hasn't that really taken off like in fashion? Like it is there, like, you know, like when we want something like exciting or like call it innovative, but it's not something that's really stuck around like in the process. Like some things I think about, like in Paris, there's a museum, I think it's like Musée des Luminaires or something. I can't quite remember the name, but it's like Museum of Light. And so they've taken like Van Gogh and like, you know, these like artists, and then like reinterpret their artwork into like these short films that are like around the room. Like it's all projection. So maybe that is like a bit more like tactile. And like, I think in fashion, especially luxury, there's a fear of getting too far away of like craft and like savoir-faire and like these things that like are very important to the culture. And so I think there's a risk of like you lose that sometimes. So that was a good example I saw. And this isn't like necessarily like phygital maybe, but I guess it is like, it's kind of like, you know, old digital, not like necessarily like 3D, but it's really interesting because like LVMH is now, they're basically becoming a media house. Like, so I just looked recently on like the Saint Laurent website, where I also used to work at Saint Laurent, and like now they have their own like film company. Like, I don't know if anyone's seen this, but it's like they've made several films. And so it's like completely digital films. I'm sure they're like presented at Cannes or something. And that's interesting. Like, that's a big shift. Like, they're like, oh, wow, like, look at Netflix. Like, how we can become Netflix. Like, we can create our own like media empires that then tell this full story of like this aspirational you like way that you can dress with our collections. You can like be there for a show, and now you can be in this full story of like and collaborating, you know, with like these top like filmmakers in the space. And so it's like there's a lot of cross industry interdisciplinary things happening, which that is very new for fashion. So yeah, it's not necessarily 3D, but it's a pretty interesting shift.
That's led me to three other ones that really jump out as well. So one that I think is always underrated, but it shouldn't be, and is I think a complete game changer, and most people are involved with it without realizing. But fitness, God, fitness! What a way to be able to communicate your fitness brand than through virtual technologies. We see it all the time. It might be augmented within your watch, and you're looking at, you know, the running journeys that you're creating. When I first started running, one of the games that I used to play was a zombie run game, and it would be immersive. And what you would have is being able to essentially, you'd have your zombie storyline in between your running. So you're basically doing all these survival situations, and then you could hear the zombies coming up further behind you, and you needed to do a sprint. So there's this immersive element to fitness. But what a great way for fitness partners to communicate their brand. There is actually an organization called the VR Fitness Institute. And the thing is, it has such a great effect on people's body because people work out for longer, for harder, without realizing when they're in virtual spaces, because you're immersed within that world. So it's another way to kind of build up that fitness space. Diversity,
That's
equity, and
hilarious.
inclusion. Yeah, there's some great ones that are out there, but DEI isn't necessarily one that people immediately jump to, but the opportunities here to be able to create immersive situations where people can understand things like what's it like to experience microaggressions, where you can create it immersive. Quite often our DEI education is very theoretical, but what can we do to create that experiential bit to be able to go, well, what's it like for this person in this kind of experience? I've traveled all over the world in a VR headset. I've been to North Korea in a VR headset. And it's one of those things that these are areas that you're not necessarily going to get to go to, but you can see culture, you can see different perspectives, different ways of living through our virtual worlds. And one of my favorite ones has also always been planetariums as well, being able to go into immersive spaces. Well, it was probably one of the first things that I got involved with a Phygital perspective was getting planetarium shows out there and being able to have people kind of see the world in front of them, being able to travel across the stars. And there was one of them called it's the astronomy photography show, and essentially being able to look at all these amazing photos that people have taken in space, but in an immersive way. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that we can look at these digital experiences. I suppose the hard thing is when you think about it, they don't all come to mind for a second. But if you sit down and you go, oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? IKEA uses AR to bring furniture into their physical spaces, so you can look at a piece of furniture in your physical space before you purchase it, because you can look at the digital one of it. So there's so many different ways, so many creative ways of being able to use this digital world. So I'm going to go on to our last question. That we'll try to do it in 60 seconds or less. How are consumer expectations evolving with the rise of digital experiences, and what implications does this have for brands and businesses?
I said, I had 2 points in 60 seconds. One is like scanning products are going to be normal. It's like it's going to be an expectation that you'll be scanning your product, whether that's like through an NFC chip or even like computer vision. That's like going to be normal, I think, right? With like the rise of what we had mentioned around digital product passports. And I think that also leads to, which is really great for fashion, since this has been like, I think in my experience, a major problem, shifting from like one-way conversations to two-way. So that for me has been like a lot to do with the community movement. Let's call it a movement, because I think it totally is. With like all, these NFT projects, like some of them have like no reason, no visible like story or anything to exist other than like financial profit. Or you have the communities that are really strong around like a core ethos, like or love women, or so I think those shifts will then have consumers be expecting to have a dialogue with brands, and expecting to have like their inputs be considered. I think it's just going to shift a lot less from like where the brand, we tell you what you want, what to do. The brand is the curator, the brand is a storyteller that shares it with like I don't even know if we call it consumer anymore, but with the participant, with the member. But
I think building on that and why that's important is, I think, because of the rise of fansumerism. So the whole idea that people don't just want to buy a product, they want to be a fan of the product. And this is where your influencers have been able to kind of, bring out merch and everything related to that, because people care far more about where this is all coming from. I think this is going to be a real challenge for big brands, because people do want to have that kind of personal connection or investment in almost like a shareholder within it by buying your product. And I do think that will definitely be an expectation. So it's a great one to be able to add on. So that's the end of today's episode. Lauren, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything you want to say to be able to wrap up or add to the conversation that we've had today?
Well, maybe some like shameless self-promotion.
Go for it.
Maybe there's a way that we can link it somewhere, but yeah, so all of these like processes that I've been talking about around like design process, around like creating brands. I'm going to be launching my first workshop on July 25th, which some people may be on vacation, but maybe you should still tune in because I'm going to be sharing basically my top process that I've learned by like developing firsthand brands and as well working in luxury for 15 years across these top cities about how I approach digitizing your label process. So it would be for if you're a designer and you want to learn how to use digital tools, if you're a brand and you want to just like find ways to enhance what you already do. I think that's like a big part of it is like, how do we we're not asking you to change who you are. It's like, here are just some tools that can help you enhance. So yeah, it's on my link tree. So maybe I can find a way to send it to you.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think there's so much value. People are looking to start this journey now, and we've kind of gone beyond the theoretical, hey, we're just talking about what's our immersive strategy for the future. We're now going, actually, we've spoken about this for long enough. We've got the decks, we've got the resources, we've got the branding. What we need to be able to do is go, how are we going to actually go and do this now? So I think an amazing opportunity for people to join and very exciting. So thank you very much for sharing. Cool. If anyone's interested in learning more about the subjects that we've spoken about, do feel free to join the community distributedrepublic.xyz or follow us at Distributed Rep. And you're saying about your link tree. I think your link tree is on your Instagram as well. So if you want to connect with either myself or Lauren, learn more about how to utilize these technologies, then I am at Jamie Bykov-Brett or at Kalulu Corp. So it'll be fantastic if you would like to reach out and talk to us further. We've had some really nice comments come through, really complimentary perspectives. So thank you so much for not necessarily questions, but for your lovely comments. So thank you so much, and we'll catch you all very, very soon. Lauren, thank you very much, and I'll catch you very, very soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.